Hello and welcome to Property Mastermind podcast, episode 179, How to Find the Right Property Development Site. Today, Bob and I will unpack some of the key things you must do to ensure you do have the right property development site. And you're going to, as usual, take away a few nuggets. So let's jump on into episode 179. Hello, welcome to episode 179. Today we're talking how to find the right property development site. And as I said, some fabulous nuggets in this one. You're going to be left thinking, oh my gosh, I want to do property development. And I tell you what, it is the thing to get into. We are ending the year, getting closer to 2024. Getting closer to 2025. And it's just a fabulous time to be in property development. We've had that sort of COVID meltdown come back, haven't we, Bob? And things.
What was COVID? I can't remember.
Oh, you remember after COVID, there was some yucky stuff that went on properties when we were slow, whatever.
Yeah.
We're back in the market.
It's history.
It is history. It's looking good. So anyway, Bob, what's your tip for the day?
Well, I think it comes out of the holiday we just went on.
Yeah.
8 days, but still, where we went to Western Australia, caught up with some people over there, had a nice little time off. I hadn't been to Rottnest Island before. You have. And we decided to fly over on the seaplane and fly back on the seaplane. And it was fantastic, seeing everything from the air, seeing Perth City from the air, because we did a big flyover.
So amazing. I would agree.
That was fun.
Great tip.
But also the ocean and coming into Rottnest. I think if you're going to Rottnest, here's a tip, if you are, off Perth, it's an island off Perth if you don't know, fly at least one way.
Yes, I would agree. That was probably the highlight of the holiday, as well as catching up with some pretty impressive mentoring students, Gerard and Chris Hall, who are going to be doing amazing things over in WA. We also had a bit of a meet-up over there with a few past students. We put it out there just quietly for those who wanted to come along. So we went out and caught up. But the day before we came home was great, wasn't it?
Oh, I love doing that.
Yeah.
I could do it at least one night a week.
Whatever. Oh, there's a nose-growing situation there. Okay, so Bob, we are looking at how to find the right property development site. And crikey, you've been doing it for over 4 decades. You've got an idea or two about this?
The right development site as opposed to a development site.
Correct.
Because not all development sites are the right ones.
No.
A development site meaning obviously a parcel of land that can be further developed, whether it's just, cutting it up into lots like a subdivision or duplex townhouses, whatever. The right one. What do we mean by the right one?
Well, what are the key components that we can unpack? I'm saying this like he doesn't know, as in like we haven't already pre-discussed this just 5 minutes ago. But anyway, you know what we're going to talk about. We're going to cover, the first one is location.
Yep.
So why is location important for the right property development site?
Well, there's a lot of aspects to location, isn't there? But so what do we want? We want a development site that we can get a good approval on, a reasonably fast approval if there's such a thing, and there is. And it's going to be profitable. So we want a location that's going to be in demand.
So what do they consider?
Well, it's all about, let's assume we're going to sell the project, because in most cases we do. We might be going to keep some, that's okay. But if we're going to sell it, it needs to be in demand.
Right.
And a lot of that has to do with location.
And who's buying?
And who's buying, your target market as well.
Yep.
I think there used to be a program on TV. I don't think it's around anymore. Location.
I think
remember?
it's still around on some
Still
channel.
around, my goodness. So that's how it is important.
So things to consider generally are schools, supermarkets, bus stops, because you listening right now, not many people go, oh, I really want to live not near any of those things. And maybe if you don't have children, you want your life to be easy. And living around those sorts of...
Well, in an urban area, yeah.
Yes.
Unless you want to live on the outskirts and grow your own veggies and all that, it'd be different.
But there's less people that want that, hey?
Yeah, for sure. Fast-paced life these days. Transport's very important.
Yeah. Employment hubs,
yeah. Transport, shopping, all those things. Right. Even things like lifestyle, coffee. I'll call it a coffee precinct. You know what I mean. A lot of these things are important, a location.
A classic example of and that's reading the market, knowing the market, which all comes into property development, was the one we just finished, not far from where we are. beachfront. Not everyone wants to live beachfront because you can live beachfront. One of my sisters...
Not everyone can afford to live beachfront.
One of my sisters owns a beachfront place, and it's it's great. It's on the beach, but it's like in the miles away from anything, and they can't even. There's not even a coffee shop. I think there's one that's open a couple of days a week or something. So it's very very rural, I would say. But if the one that we did ticks all of those boxes. It's an in-demand place to live. It's beachfront, and how do we know we got it right?
Well, we know we got it right because we put it to the market, and the very first open house sold it, 2.5 million, no discussions about price, in 20 minutes.
Yeah. So that's how you know you did it right. So the flip side of that, Bob, is what's a location that wouldn't offer that? Where could people fall into a problem with picking the wrong location?
Yeah. When we say the wrong location, it doesn't mean it'll never sell, but it might be slow to sell, and that costs you money with interest. It might mean that you have to drop your price a bit to sell it if it's not located well, and of course that chews into your profit. So either way, you don't want it to happen. But a little bit, I guess, a little bit has to do with who are you selling to? Is it an investor or an owner-occupier? Because that has a little bit to do with location. For instance, some suburbs are what I call dormitory suburbs. It's where there's a high percentage of renters, and so most renters are fine with that, and because there's probably a reason why a lot of the people that live there rent. And it might be around those things of, transport, particularly shopping centres. These are people that aren't necessarily going to rent forever, but they just want that location. It might be close to work, it's close to a railway station, Westfield's over the road, who knows. But then you've got owner-occupiers who often won't want to live in that sort of dormitory suburb. They want stuff close by, but they don't want a busy road that a renter might be okay with. They don't want to be 100 metres from Westfield, but they'd like to be within, 800 a kilometre of Westfield, those sorts of things. And so a lot of the better owner-occupier suburbs have a lower percentage of renters. That's got a little bit to do with location. Knowing your target market. You just mentioned that duplex a moment ago that we sold the first one off straight off a couple of weeks ago. That's typical owner-occupier.
Yeah, but that's all part of everything you need to know as a property developer, and finding the right site is who you're developing for, what are they after. So we knew we were going to sell to an owner-occupier. We knew that they're likely to be a downsizer, meaning that they are leaving the family home and making a smaller home but still want somewhere beautiful. We knew they've got a reasonable amount of money, that it's not their first home. So there were all the things we knew about, so we knew it was the right place to put that product. So looking at the opposite of that, say we'd built that same property in an area that there are a lot of people renting, then a downsizer might not want to live there. That makes it a wrong location for that product, doesn't it?
Yeah, different target market, different product.
And you're thinking, why? It's because you get home and you've got 5 cars parked outside your house because all the people next door are renting, and they've got like 4 people in each house, and all of that sort of stuff.
You can usually pick those areas, can't you, when you drive past after work, say it's 7 o'clock at night, and the street's just full of cars.
Oh, yeah. It reminds me of a lot of the places we can drive past on our way back here, you just know that it's rentville. And that's cool. We've all rented before.
Yeah.
But what about, Bob, things like mining towns?
Oh, they're a bit different, aren't they? Thing about mining towns is they're either really hot or they're really cold.
Yeah.
And because they're driven by mining, that's why personally I've gone towards, places of larger population that aren't driven by one particular factor, e.g. mining. If you cast your mind back sort of, 2010, but post-GFC, a lot of the mining boom that happened, a lot of people made a lot of money fast in some of those mining towns. But then if you stayed too long and mining dropped off, because remember, mining sort of goes in waves, didn't sell at the right time. It's all about timing in those sorts of places. I don't really want to be part of that.
You're not saying actually like Perth itself, are you?
No, not Perth. Perth's a capital city, but by the same token, a big industry is mining, and that's okay. Perth's been going well. But I'm just saying, like,
the town.
Places that are 100% mining.
Yep.
And so, that's just too much resting on one industry.
Yeah.
and it's an industry that can go up or down. If it goes up or down, your property goes up or down.
So the risk is just too high. So that sort of covers the negative and the positive of location, like how we just did a great job on something awesome, and then how you can do a bad job. So Bob, what are the next thing I've got for, how to find the right site is, do the numbers stack up? It's all about the feasibility, isn't it?
Well, it always is with property development. It's a numbers thing. So it has to be profitable enough for us to firstly want to do it, but profitable enough for our financiers to want to back it. So they don't want a project with a very low profit margin. So yeah, numbers are everything. Feasibility, critically important, has to stack up. And location can have something to do with the numbers working as well. There's some locations where it just doesn't work at the moment.
Yes, and at the moment. There are three very strong words there, that Bob, aren't they?
Yeah.
Things cannot work at the moment, and then they can start to work again.
Yeah. I mean, a typical example, and it's not something you see a lot of at the moment, but I have in my lifetime, is oversupply. Sometimes in a particular area, if you like a suburb or whatever, you can get an oversupply of a particular type of product. It could be apartments, could be townhouses or whatever, or even land. Land subdivisions in some places. Well, it's not a place to develop right now. But in 12 months, 18 months' time, because a lot of people then didn't go ahead with the developments, they didn't get development permits, and that excess stock has been soaked up, slowly sold, all of a sudden you've got an undersupply. And that's not unusual in areas where you have an oversupply. 12 months, 18 months down the track, that area is undersupplied.
I remember you talking about this with apartments in Brisbane, Bob.
Oh, yeah.
And even, does that happen in the Gold Coast as well? Because there's a lot of apartments there.
The Gold Coast.
It's like a microclimate.
Oh, look, it's getting better, for sure. I lived there in, a long time ago. Probably in the 1980s, I lived there for a while. Very hot and cold. I mean, 1 minute you've got 5,000 apartments on the market. 4 years later, you got none.
This is in the apartment market at the Gold Coast. Don't everyone else panic.
No, well, there's two markets on the Gold Coast. You've got the tourism market, which is usually seaside of the highway, and then you've got the rest of the Gold Coast where people live. And yeah, it is strong, and then it's weak, and then strong, and then it's weak. It's getting better. It's getting its secondary industries have picked up, but hot and cold markets, certainly. I went on some roller coaster rides back in the early days when I lived and developed on the Gold Coast in another life.
Yeah, so when we talk about feasibilities, which is running the numbers, and we've talked about that in relation to location, but there's also the small things that you've got to consider, the unknowns, and that's why you need to do the due diligence. We're talking about things like the site itself. Are there extra costs that will come into something? In fact, I was talking to somebody last week who just had another problem with asbestos, where they thought it was all taken off the site, and again, it hadn't been. So, just a new problem had risen for them. So those little additional costs. So what other things can cause additional costs, Bob, on a site if you haven't done enough due diligence and really run the numbers to be sure you got it right?
Yeah, well, you just mentioned demolition as potentially asbestos. It's not cheap to get rid of, that can blow up your costs a bit. I mean, it's not to be a deal killer generally, but a lot of those houses built in the 50s and 60s, they used to bury the
bodies.
No bodies. Well, hopefully not.
They probably did,
Yeah.
In the Gold Coast, there'd be heaps of bodies
This
and
is
sites
not New
down.
York.
Oh, right. Sorry.
So because there's a lot of asbestos in the manufacture, the roof, the walls, they used to bury all their offcuts under the carport. And I've had so many demolitions that were built back in those days, and I learnt to allow extra. Because when you get a quote for demolition, they'll say, providing there's no asbestos. Well, that's pretty rare. And sure enough, when they dig up the slab for the carport, there's piles of asbestos where they buried all their offcuts. And, it's another $5 or $6 grand to get rid of that. So that's, one you mentioned there. But what about the ground itself? That can vary a lot.
Not just the slope? Or are you talking slope? Or are you talking about the soil?
The quality, its capacity to bear the weight of buildings. That can vary quite a lot. We get what we call a soil test on, if we're just going to build something simple like some townhouses or houses, we have to get a soil test. There's all sorts of classifications of soils, and some of them are, like clay, are very highly reactive, and they have a particular type of foundation design. Where we live, it's a lot of sand. That's a different type. And so some areas that are very highly reactive and expansive can cost...
What do you mean by reactive?
Well, they react to water and things like that.
Oh, reactive to water, okay.
Yeah. One of my, back in the old days, very early projects I did was at a place called Red Bank, which is outside of Ipswich. Did some low-set villas. And in this particular area, it was really red sort of soil. But when it was dry, it just opened up into really big cracks. And that cost us a lot of money on the foundations.
Right.
There has to be a particular type of foundation. Some of them can be quite expensive. And I was with my mate there one day. Back in those days, we didn't even do our own landscaping and stuff like that, And I said, oh, geez, this crack looks deep. And I had a crowbar, which was about my height. And I said, let's see how deep it is. And I held the end of the crowbar and it went all the way down to my hand and accidentally dropped it and the crowbar disappeared. So I don't know how deep that crack was. Way more than the crowbar.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like New Zealand earthquake stuff.
So there you go. 10,000 years' time, they're going to excavate that area and they're going to find this weird crowbar under the ground.
Unlike the asbestos they find now. They'll find crowbar.
Yeah, so that can add a lot. Particularly if you're doing bigger buildings like apartments. I've seen some apartment builders who don't get their geotechnical tests done early suddenly find that there's all sorts of issues there, particularly if you're building basements. You can have water, and dewatering a basement is expensive. You can hit rock, that can be expensive. Bluestone, wow, that's really hard stuff to crack.
Do you know what I just am relating this to? All those winery trips we did last week in WA, and that makes a really good Chardonnay. Because remember that type of soil when it's quite sandy and rocky and lots of water gets through. A little bit off topic there, but I learned a little bit there. I was listening and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Good for growing vines, but not necessarily great for building on.
Yeah,
perhaps.
There you go. A little bit off topic. We can go back now.
So we're back to talking about even things like ground conditions.
Yes.
And we talked about slope. Obviously, is another one. Because it costs more, it's not rocket science, it costs more to build a building on a slope than it does on flat ground.
But not just for the building of it, you've also got water drainage and there's a lot more that, sometimes you think one thing, but there's more reasons that impacts the development.
Well, on a slope, you're either going to what we call cut and fill, which is where you cut some ground out off the high side and push it out and fill in the low side so you can get a flat platform to build on. But then you're creating things like retaining walls and then the flow of water, what happens when it rains? We said, well, now we're going to have drainage. So we've got, like you just said, we've got drainage, we've got retaining walls just to get it flat. But then if you build on the slope with the slope, without cutting and filling too much, then you've got all sorts of fancy roofs. You've got suspended floors. How are you going to do that? It just adds a lot to build costs. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do the development. But you need to buy the land at a price that will allow to spend that extra money on construction, because you can't get it when you sell it. You can't tell the buyer, hey, listen, I had to spend another $30,000 because of the the ground conditions. You'll have to pay $30,000 more. No, thanks. They won't.
So when we're talking about how to find the right development site, that becomes the wrong development site for you right now, unless you can, unless the feasibility, the numbers work out.
It's always back to the numbers.
Yeah. So it's back to, we've talked about location, we've talked about the feasibility, as in knowing what everything's going to cost. But the next thing we're going to talk about, Bob, is the demand. Like, why is that?
How important is that?
Yeah, how important is that for being the right or the wrong property development?
Economics 101.
Yep.
Never studied economics, but supply and demand.
Yes. It's not if you build it, they will come. It's not a thing.
No. It's not Field of Dreams, folks.
Yes.
So, demand. So we need to see the demand for that product. You can have in the same place a strong demand for one product and a weak demand for another product.
Yes.
And that can come back even to oversupply. Like, quick story. You mentioned before... back in, about 10 years ago, I was developing in Brisbane a lot of apartments. But then they started, I could sort of see, there's going to be an oversupply because there was too many development permits going through and build costs were starting to go up. So I started to pull back on apartments. I got out okay. Some people didn't. They just kept pushing on, and then they were left with an apartment block where they still made a profit.
Left holding the
but
baby.
They had to. Well, yeah. They had to sell them for less, so they didn't make the profit that they wanted to. They still most of them made a profit, but not what they wanted to make because of the oversupply.
Yep.
Because when you get an oversupply, typically you move it by discounting the price somewhat, and selling it. But I can tell you that at that time there was an oversupply of apartments. There was an undersupply of townhouses and an undersupply of blocks of land to build houses on. You'd have one suburb where strong demand for a block of land, strong demand for townhouses, very weak demand because of the oversupply for apartments in the same suburb at the same time. So demand, that's what we're talking about. It's demand in an area, and you can have a strong demand in one suburb, weaker demand in another, or even in the same area, different levels of demand for different products. And so what you have to do as a developer, as much as you can, crystal ball, is understand what the demand is in that area. So you see a parcel of land.
And what the target market is, what they're after. That becomes, it is about that, isn't it?
Yeah, because you might have more than one use for a block of land.
Yeah.
You might have an 800 metre lot, and it's possible that you might be able to cut it into two 400s and build two houses. It's possible you might be able to build, let's say, 4 townhouses on it. It's possible you might be able to build 6 apartments on it. Like same parcel of land. Well, back to demand. What is the demand here? Is it for houses on 400 metre lots? Is it for townhouses? Is it for apartments? And if there was a strong demand for everything, all 3 of them, then you need to do your numbers, which you'd have to do anyway. And so, well, does one make more profit than another? Is one going to take me longer to develop than another? And these are the sorts of things that come into it. And as you said, you could have different buyers, different types of buyers, different buyer profile for the different products. It could be that those houses, 2-storey, 4-bed, 2 living room type houses on a 400 metre lot, they might be suitable in that area, like for downsizes like you talked about earlier. Whereas the 2-bedroom apartments in the same suburb that you could even build on the same lot might be more investment stock. But for, younger professionals or whatever. So, yeah.
And so that's really the for people that are newer listening to the podcast, because I know if we go back a few episodes, we talk about highest and best use, and that covers the highest and best use. So highest and best use isn't always about the amount of money that you'll make, because if you build them, they will come, doesn't work. It might mean that you're better off putting 3 townhouses and which make X amount of profit because they're more likely to sell, than putting 7, which jam packs, doesn't look as great, and it's not a sort of rental purchasing sort of area. So
more isn't always better with property development.
No, so that's where demand is so important, isn't it? And just knowing how to just get that information and have it collated.
That's back to knowing your market.
Yeah.
Developers, we have to know our market. If we're going to develop in a particular area, we have to really understand that market. What type of developments are going in there, who's building them, what sort of product is it, who's buying them, all those things.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, build it and they will buy. No, not necessarily.
Field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. No. So, when we talk about, how to find the right development site, how many right development sites have you let go accidentally? Oh, actually, I've got one. I've got one right now. A while ago, not even that long ago, maybe within the last 12 months, we had a cracker. We actually had a cracker, and we had an investor who was keen to do the whole thing, and because of how we sort of were leading up to it, and they said, yep, we're all good to go, and then last minute they changed their mind, and we actually lost that site because it was too late for us to flip over and us do it, and it was just because we'd trusted the investor. Be careful of investors. So that was a bit frustrating. But anyway, we got another one not long after that, and that investor has let us down a second time. So he's gone.
He had one crack at that.
We gave him 2.
See you later.
But anyway, Bob, have you ever had a really great site and you didn't? What was the reason you didn't go for it? And what's the result? Are you still kicking yourself?
Well, yeah, I suppose, I can remember one place, I was doing a 6 townhouse project, and it was well located, near shops, near transport, fairly close to the state university, really good for rental particularly. I was doing it more as a student accommodation thing. And another site came up in the next street, and I was offered it probably a week before it went on the market. And I had a look at it. I did the numbers. I thought, this is a good site. But at the time, I was having some problems with my other site. It was sort of early days, and I was having some pretty intense problems with the design and the structural engineering, and my bill costs were coming out way too high. And I did eventually solve it, but it probably took me 6 or 8 weeks to solve this problem. And it was during that period when it came up, and as good as it looked, I wasn't in the right headspace. I kept going back trying to solve this other problem, which did solve itself. By the time my problem solved itself, someone else had bought that site. And the sad part is, while I was building mine in the next street, I had to keep driving past this other site. So they were a little bit behind mine, but I watched it go up. I watched it get finished. I watched it get sold. And I thought, I could have done that. That should have been mine. And but my fault, no,
Because you were just under too much pressure with the current site that you were working with to take that extra action. And sometimes that happens, but you just kind of live with it.
I knew it was profitable. I knew exactly what sort of money it was going to make. I just got bogged down in the head with this other thing, which was quite important at the time. But yeah.
Well, next week's podcast, we've got an interview with a past mentoring student, Clayton Tierney, and Clayton talks about a site he didn't take action on, and he kicked himself for so long because it was a really big site. And he said that's kind of one of his lifelong regrets, but he said he didn't take action because he was too scared to. And that's something that a lot of people do.
He wouldn't be scared now.
Oh, no. Now he's nailing it, smashing it. It's a great interview. You're going to love listening to next week's podcast. But, he
still talks about that.
I know.
Nearly every time I talk to Clayton, he brings it up.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. But that is the case for a lot of people, isn't it? They do find the right site and things do work out, but they just are too fearful to take action.
Oh, well, you know all about that. Fear.
Yeah.
I've seen people get to the point, found the site, do the due diligence, everything works, the numbers work. Now they've got to go to contract.
Can't do it.
And they melt. Or they look for a reason or an excuse, or something's happened, something's happening. I just can't do it,
So sad. Well, Bob, I think that we will wind this one up here.
Okay.
So we're, how to find a good site, a good property development site. We've talked about location being important and why. We've talked about feasibilities, and we're talking about the costs that go into it, being aware of the costs, the hidden costs. So that comes into due diligence.
Yeah.
And then obviously the demand of the product that you're going to develop. They are 3 key areas for finding a property development site. Have you got anything?
Getting the right one.
Yeah, getting the right one.
Not a property development site.
Yes. So have you got anything you'd like to finish off with?
Well, I think that, obviously you're not going to find a deal that stacks up every time you look at one. And you've got to be prepared that you're going to throw quite a few in the rubbish bin. But it's well worth it when you get one. Because it can, property development can be life-changing. You can make 3, 4, 5, 6 times your annual salary out of just one deal. And so it is worth the effort. It's worth the grind. It's worth throwing them in the bin if they don't work. Just don't give up. Yeah,
if you've been thinking about property development, just jump in. We've got fabulous courses. Our website's been all redone, and it's very clear, easy to follow, and we've got fabulous resources available. We've got free ones. We've got our podcast, there's a stack of information on here. But if you seriously want to get into property development now, soon, then jump on board, come join us and be part of a huge amount of people who Bob has helped become incredibly successful. And why not? If not you, then who?
Exactly.
All right, folks, that's it for this week. We'll catch you next week, and you'll be able to hear from Clayton Tierney. Bye.
Bye now.